friends, my name is Marines and this is a review of Assistant to the Villain. Let's talk about why I'm reading this. Earlier this year I read and hated Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, but when I went into that book I was excited to read it. I was caught up in all of the hype that people were giving that book even very early on. The week that Fourth Wing was published there were already over 1,000 5-star reviews up on Goodreads, so there was a lot of pre-publication hype and people that I generally tend to agree with read this and really enjoyed it. So that's really all I knew when I picked up the book, was like, this had a lot of good hype. Some people that I trust really enjoyed it. I am a fantasy reader. I am a romance reader. Like, everything was like tick, tick, tick. I picked it up and was almost immediately like, oh, this is like terrible. Actually, the quality here, the quality of the writing itself was abysmal. And the opening chapters were so awkward and so badly written that it was astonishing to me, which is when I turned on my camera and decided to vlog the rest of my reading it. And so that's how my Fourth Wing video happened. Because that book was so popular and so hyped, I had a ton of conversations surrounding it, and that became not only discussions about Fourth Wing, but about Red Tower, which is the brand new imprint that published Fourth Wing. Red Tower is the new adult sci-fi fantasy arm of Entangled Publishing, and Fourth Wing was the very first thing that it published, and it hit huge with a very interesting approach to its marketing. There are portions of what Red Tower is doing that feel like really good and really obvious marketing strategies, but there are portions that also feel a little bit shady to me. And like the grand total of like the Red Tower project to me feels a little nefarious. And I know that that is colored by my bias of like really hating Fourth Wing, but I am like very invested in the project of Red Tower. I think I was really tuned into the Red Tower approach because of all of the pre-publication hype, because there were somehow so many 5-star reviews leading up to release, and there was this like huge push of positive reviews coming out up to release, and then you had the forced scarcity of the stencil edges making people feel like they had to go out and buy this and get it before the copies ran out, and we saw that they eventually did run out. And so like the waiting around for the second printing, and now people are collecting the stenciled edges, and resale value is like off the charts on these stenciled edges. And then I learned that the second book was coming out in 6 months. The entire series, which is a 5-book series, is on a rapid release schedule. And so like that, I was like, what the heck is that? And then I saw a description from the publisher of like what Red Tower was, and they described it as like the glory days of YA, but make it spicy and aged up. And something about that just like sat wrong in my spirit, especially because the things that it referenced were things like Divergent and the Hunger Games as like the glory days of YA, which that is like the dystopian sort of height of YA. And then to like compare something like the Hunger Games or even Divergent, honestly, to what was happening in Fourth Wing, like made me incredibly frustrated. So from all of this, from my deep dislike of Fourth Wing to like my questioning of the Red Tower project, really Red Tower emerged as like a new literary nemesis for me, and I'm just so interested in paying attention to what they release and how they release it. And that brings us to Assistant to the Villain by Nicole Maehrer, which yes was project reading for me. Like I went in not expecting necessarily to dislike it because I knew nothing about the author or like the project that this was based on, but I was already like keyed in to be critical of Red Tower, and I was already keyed in to like pay attention to the quality of what is coming out of Red Tower. So if that's going to bother you that I'm specifically reading a popular work with like a project in mind, then this isn't the video for you. I think the video right before I published this one is a reading vlog, and I talk about 4 or 5 books that I really enjoyed, so you can check that one out. And for the most part, my page is a mix of things that I don't enjoy and do enjoy, so you can go ahead and check that out. Assistant to the Villain started off as a series of TikTok sketches, which has over 200 episodes at this point, and it's basically just like, what if the sunshiny person was an assistant to a very attractive villain?
This is what I think it would be like if I was the morally gray fantasy villain's personal assistant. Okay, the real dream job. Sir, you have a phone call? Oh, you're torturing someone. Oh, that's a lot of blood. I'll take a message. You want me to get a towel? Okay, I'm leaving. Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt your meeting. Did you mean to make an appointment to get your hair dyed? Oh my god, I didn't say anything. I knew that wasn't his natural color.
Then he cut the guy's finger off. Is that not the hottest thing you've ever heard?
Becky, you're in HR. What do you know?
Sir, you have some messages I think I should read you. There's one from the main character that says she is going to slowly take your life. One from her love interest saying that he is going to cut you apart limb from limb. Do you want me to respond to those or
Burn her childhood home to the ground? I meant like a written message.
you want me to do it?
Oh, Becky, where's the lighter fluid? This is what I think it would be like if I was the morally gray fantasy villain's personal assistant. Episode 4? Good morning, sir. Do you have conspirators chained up in the dungeon downstairs? That's hot. Oh my god, I was joking.
Sir, I have a form I need you to sign. Why are you naked?
You spilled coffee on your leather pants. Okay, I'll just go get you something from the dry clean.
There was not an ounce of fat on that man's body. Do you think he ever eats donuts?
Go ahead, file a report, Becky. I wasn't the one naked.
So we're gonna push burning down the village and conquering the city to next week. By the way, sir, would you mind if I cut out early today? Brett from finance asked me if I would get coffee with him.
Oh, sir, your glass is broken in your hand and it's bleeding a lot.
You want me to get you a Band-Aid or?
Okay, I'll go.
Oh, I think he has beef with Brett because he broke the copier last month.
Oh my god, Becky, not everything is about you. This is what I think it would be like if I was the morally great fantasy villain's personal assistant. Episode, it happened.
Oh, sir, this is your childhood bedroom.
It's adorable.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's terrifying.
That stuffed unicorn on your bed is really petrifying. A tiny, tiny bed. How are we both gonna fit in that tiny bed? You'd almost have to sleep on top of each other. Oh my god, that was supposed to stay in my head.
Oh, sir, I feel bad if you sleep on the floor.
Right, you're a villain, but you have manners.
I'm just kidding. You're very polite.
Thanks again for letting me have one of your shirts, sir. Oh no, I'm not borrowing it. I won't be giving it back. It's really comfy.
Is that a nightlight?
You afraid of the dark?
Okay, I'm going to sleep.
No. No paperwork, Becky.
Sir, your face is very close to my face. It was just a nightmare. I'm fine. How are you?
Good morning, everyone. I had a great night's sleep.
Oh, sure, Mrs. Villain. I would love some breakfast. Becky, ow! Oh my god, Becky, shut up. Nothing happened last night.
Egg sounds great.
Oh my god, something totally happened last night.
That is where the book essentially comes from. This was released in paperback with sprayed edges. I actually listened to a podcast with some of the executives over at Red Tower, and something that they said that was really interesting was that they wanted to give people books that had the feeling of belonging to book boxes, but like more generally released. So this like sprayed edges and limited release sort of thing is something that they're doing intentionally to draw more people to their books. Essentially, I had a pretty bad time with Assistant to the Villain, and a lot of the problems that I had with this book are also problems that I had with Fourth Wing. The premise of the book is essentially the same as the skits. We have this young woman named Evie who is desperately searching for a job to support her family, and she finds a position being an assistant to the villain who is named the villain. And basically from there we watch the interaction between the assistant and the villain, and then I guess like the real plot is that like somebody is sabotaging the villain, and so they're trying to figure out like who is sabotaging him as the book goes along. So as you could probably tell from the skits that it is based on, this is supposed to be like cheeky, lighthearted, and funny. And I will be gracious enough here to admit that part of like my experience with this book was that it was like highly not for me. I also think it was bad, but I can also say that like some of it was just not for me, and namely that was the humor. This was trying to be funny, and because I found absolutely no humor here, the entire experience was like the cringe that you feel when somebody is telling like bad joke after bad joke and you're like that was like the entire thing for me. I was thinking really hard to see how I could try and capture the vibe of the humor, and I came up with two sort of comparisons. One is that reading this felt like watching a Disney Channel original movie as an adult. It has the same kind of like juvenile humor, a little bit slapsticky. The humor is kind of like cheesy in that same vein. So this felt like a DCOM without the context of children. I said this in my TikTok and someone was like, oh, well, like a grown-up DCOM is like a Hallmark movie. And it isn't quite that. It isn't quite Hallmark level. If you just say Hallmark movie, you're actually missing the brand of humor and like the slapstickiness that comes with a DCOM, and that is what this book is. The second comparison for me is like if you've ever seen like Gen Z making fun of millennials and the way that millennials are online, especially if you've seen these millennial according to Gen Z videos and thought like no millennial I know actually speaks this way or acts this way. So the essence of a millennial cringe video coming from Gen Z, like that that is actually this book. I think worst of all is that not only was this like not funny and a little bit awkward to me, it was really recycling like one single joke the entire time. Like the entire joke is that he is a villain, but he's hot. And so she has all of these moments of like, yeah, he's torturing people, but my gosh, he's hot. And it's just that single joke over and over and over again. It's really like this project was like, oh, we heard you like villains, hot villains, but that was it. I didn't do anything else. And I guess that might sound enjoyable for some people, but I just don't understand why it ever needed to move from 60-second skits to like an entire book. I think that maybe it could have worked as a book if tonally this was something a little bit different. It needed to pick a lane and either fully lean into like he's a villain, but really he's like misunderstood, or it needed to lean into, no, actually he's like a murderer and we're just gonna roll with that. And that's actually the joke and the point, is that he's the like hottest murderer ever. But it kept kind of going back and forth. It was like, no, he has his reasons, he's misunderstood, but then it just had all of this casual violence, and it was casual violence that we're getting through Evie's lens. So the fact that she's so casual about it, that she would just be like, oh yeah, dead bodies here, torture chamber here, he killed an intern, he threw someone off a roof, ha 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 ha. And I was just like, what is happening here? I don't understand the tone. I did not get the tone. It also felt too earnest to be like successful satire and way too shallow to be commentary. This was like not commentary at all, or like deconstruction, or like asking you to think at all about like society's obsession with villains and like, I don't know, attractiveness as a way that people perform evil, or like an excuse to do evil. Like, it was not doing any of that work. The entire thing was just like, he's a murderer, but he's hot. I think it really bothered me that like while it's busy over here like hee ha-haing about like this like banter that's going on, it kept running smack dab into commentary. It just like kept tripping over all of this commentary accidentally about like capitalism and what we do to survive, and this idea of like what attractive white men can get away with, and the like weaponized incompetency of men. But it just had all of these things like yelling at you through the text, but on accident, because the author had absolutely no interest in looking at it, any of this, acknowledging it, talking about it. She was here to do the one joke, murder man is hot. Because it was so clumsy, there were a couple of additional things that it kind of ran into that I also think were pretty accidental. One is that there's another supporting female character in here, and she's set up as something of an antagonist. She's sort of like Evie's nemesis in The Office, and I think she's the only character in the book that is described as having brown skin. And like, why is this woman evil? Why is she a bitch? Why is she a nemesis? Your guess is as good as mine. Even if you haven't read this book, your guess is still as good as mine. Because honestly, I just feel like we're supposed to believe that she's a bitch because she's an attractive brown woman who wants to get her job done. That bothered me extra because meanwhile, the villain is over here like literally torturing people and leaving dead bodies all over the workplace. And Evie's like, that man. But this brown woman shows up on screen and she's like, oh, here comes the evil woman. And I'm like, why? The other thing that happened is a vague spoiler. I will keep it as vague as possible, but if you want to skip over this because for some reason you still want to read this, I get it. I'm curious too. I read it for myself. You can skip over this part, but at the end, when we are trying to figure out who is actually betraying them, we have like a showdown with like the person that it is. And this person had a hand in Evie's sexual assault, which is like mentioned throughout the book. She had a previous job, but her boss there sexually assaulted her, and that's why she like got away. And this person that was ultimately sabotaging them set her up for that. These characters, the ones involved in Evie's sexual assault, are ultimately being used as a foil to the villain. And the implication is like, no, these are the real monsters, not the man that is like murdering and torturing. And I super don't like pitting those two things against each other, because I'm not interested in playing like which is more morally reprehensible in any way, shape, or form. But I do hate the underlying message that is something that you often see, and that is that what happened to you is worse than being dead, that you would be better off being dead than being a survivor. I hate that, and also it was like completely unnecessary here. I don't even know what to tell you about like the main romance in this, because I honestly, the characters were so flat that it's always difficult to talk about like the romantic portion of it when the characters are like barely there. But apart from him being handsome, I'm not really sure what we're supposed to believe is like the attraction for Evie here. The problem in romances where we're like relying on the like broody bad boy or like the quiet grumpy one or anything like that is that it can so easily lean into like not giving that male character any personality. He's so busy being aloof or being in the shadows or being taciturn or not saying anything or not expressing emotions that you end up with like a block of wood. Like you could sub out any inanimate object for this main male character and it would be essentially the same, and that's the way that I felt about this. Even in the banter that was going back and forth between them, like that wasn't enough like spark for the character, and it didn't leave me feeling like, ah, yes, this is why you would overlook somebody torturing villagers or like throwing interns off a roof, because like, what a man. Truly, that was like what this book had to convince me of, and it failed. This is another work that is very trope led. The priority here was this trope of grumpy and sunshine and assistant to the villain without any thought to, and I'm not even asking for depth, but like without any thought to any of the other elements. There was a sort of anachronism to this all that worked for like 60-second skits on TikTok where you really didn't have to ask questions about who the villain was and like why he has an assistant and where we are, because that was so contained. But when you have an entire book of like this weird, like, oh, sometimes feudal and magical like world, undefined place, but also like this villain has interns and our main character is wearing stilettos and the language is like really modern, and all of that was very distracting. It was very grating. It was very unenjoyable to me. The plot was really nothing because again, all it was interested in were tropes, but it was like nothing. I hate when authors attempt to do like something plot light, but ultimately give us some sort of mystery, something that our characters are trying to solve. Like if you want to do nothing plots, plot light, don't introduce a mystery element to it. Just do slice of life, do something along those lines. But introducing a mystery and then like not supporting it at all, I think is one of the most frustrating reading experiences, because it's just like kind of hanging out of like, oh, we're trying to figure something out, but you forget about it most of the time. You don't build up to a satisfying reveal. And then this had the absolute audacity to have like the LaCroix of a plot in here and then still end on a cliffhanger. The fact that this is a series is bonkers to me. The fact that this had the absolute gall and gumption to end on a cliffhanger, I just, wow. It's actually kind of impressive. The writing and editing itself was pretty low quality. There is a way that like the writing itself, apart from like the jokes, the cringe humor, and some of the banter, like all of the connective tissue feels incredibly lifeless. So for those of you keeping track at home, I thought the characters were flat. They were basically just walking tropes that were there to land a single joke, and it was a joke that I did not think was funny. The world is like barely there, and what is there is anachronistic. The plot is barely there, except for when it shows up at the end to be like, and then read more books. The writing quality and the editing quality were also pretty terrible. So there was nothing truly that I enjoyed about this experience. Was it the worst thing I've ever read before in my life? No, I wouldn't say that. Someone asked me if I had to like rank Fourth Wing and this, like how would I rank them? They're pretty on par, honestly, for like quality of the thing. There's a way that Assistant to the Villain was more aware of what it was. Like, it was trying to be lighthearted and fluffy and funny. Fourth Wing was over here trying to do like fantasy murder college, high stakes, dystopian flavor, and like failing at all of those things that it was trying to do because it wanted to ultimately be a fun and fluffy romance. Like, that's what it really wanted to do, but it had all of these like props that it was also failing at. This knew it wanted to be a fun and fluffy romance. It tried it. Parts of that were not for me. Parts of it I just think were really bad. They're both like 1.5 out of 5 stars for me. I'm not saying one is better than the other at all, but if you like held me at gunpoint and were like, you have to read one of these again, I'd go, okay, Assistant to the Villain, it's shorter. So what are the ways that Fourth Wing and Assistant to the Villain feel the same to me? Or what are the things that connect it, that ultimately connect back to the Red Tower project? One, we know that what Red Tower is doing is putting out these new adult books, right? And there's like a whole conversation about new adult as an age category that is not something that I want to jump into for the purpose of this video. But the thing that bothers me about both Fourth Wing and Assistant to the Villain is the like tonal dissonance, because it's still doing mostly a YA project. It is mostly doing YA things. It reads like YA. It has plotting like YA. It has themes like YA. I wish that if we were going to be like, we're gonna make NA a thing, that it was more clearly defined what that age category is, what it means, and what it reads like, because both Fourth Wing and Assistant to the Villain read young. And to be clear, that is not why either of them are bad, because there's brilliant YA. I'm just noting that that's kind of like what feels true about both of these things, is that they read like YA to me. Both Fourth Wing and Assistant to the Villain are very badly edited. They're like, the quality of the work itself, the book itself, according to me and my standards and my taste, it's like really low quality product. It feels like what Red Tower is like investing their time and money and budget and energy into is like the flash and the bang of the product versus like the quality of the product. Like, I keep joking that all of the editorial budget is going into sprayed edges, and I don't know how much of a joke that is, because turns out that Fourth Wing and Assistant to the Villain, according to the credits at the author's note, were both edited by the same person, and that person is the CEO of Entangled. The CEO of Entangled is overseeing Red Tower, and she's editing the books that are coming out of Red Tower. Do with that information what you will, but to me, it just confirms what I've been feeling all along, and it is that these books are not well edited. Number 3, these like fantasy romances are like heavy on the romance side. Both of them failed at world and world building. It feels like those elements are just flimsy props to get to what ultimately matters in both of these books, which is the trope of a relationship, which in Fourth Wing is enemies to lovers, questionable, and in Assistant to the Villain is grumpy sunshine. There's also a crossover when it comes to both being highly anachronistic, which I think is really interesting as like a shared quality, but I think that goes back to like not being interested in actual world building, but wanting to capture like a young voice, right? And to capture a young audience. And this is something I'm sure we'll talk about as we continue on this Red Tower journey, and that is like how white their roster is. So spoiler alert, I've only read 2, and these are 2 white authors, but I think every release except for 1 or 2 maybe going up until mid next year are from white authors. So there's a very, very white roster, and even in the books, the way that people of color are employed, with Xaden in Fourth Wing and Rebecca in here, are like tapping into tropes that I don't super enjoy. I will say that Assistant to the Villain is the 3rd book that Red Tower published. I did go out of order, but I started reading Starbringer and it was so bad and it's taking me forever. So, you know, stay tuned for Starbringer whenever I finally manage to get through it. If you have read or would like to read Assistant to the Villain, let's chat in the comments. If you have any thoughts about like Red Tower and what they're doing and like their capitalistic hellscape approach to marketing, and let's also chat in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon.